Cloudy conditions with some late rain showers and a low of 35. I'm meteorologist Jason Caterina on AM 560, The Answer.
Get the latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com.
This hourly segment is brought to you by Goldilocks, offering 24/7 security solutions for homes and businesses. Call them today at 708-889-5600.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. VDH, Victor Davis Hanson, had an interesting take, as he always does, on the first 2 weeks of the military campaign in Iran, saying the following of why this war feels surreal to him.
Either the regime is going to be replaced now or in the next few weeks as the people come out of their homes and see what their country is like and what the theocracy caused and what it did to them. Or there's going to be some Venezuelan solution where the strongman will come forward. Or maybe that won't happen at all and the United States under political pressure will stop. But if it stops, they have destroyed the Iranian military and its nuclear and missile program for years. So this was all preferable to the situation pre-war in which Iran still was working on the bomb, still had 3,000 missiles and more drones, and was boasting that it was going to, at any time it wanted, close the Straits of Hormuz. And they've tried it, and they will not be successful. Put it all together, this is a surreal war. What is actually happening is not being reported, and there's an alternate reality that's been constructed by the left that sees this war as politically advantageous to its agenda to recapture power in the United States. If it convince us, the American people, that A, we're losing, B, we may deserve to lose, C, it's all Donald Trump's fault, and this war will be beneficial in denying him the Republican majorities in Congress in about 8 months.
That's a pretty interesting summation. Let's get reaction from Daniel DePetris, fellow at Defense Priorities and a syndicated foreign affairs columnist at the Chicago Tribune and Newsweek. Daniel, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan. How you doing?
Good. So how do you respond to, VDH laying out essentially what three possible outcomes are? That seems pretty straightforward. But combined with the domestic politics of this and the story that's being told versus the reality on the ground in Iran.
Yeah, Dan, I think militarily, judged by military metrics, the war is obviously going pretty well in the fact that we're wiping out a significant amount of the command and control. We've depleted about 60% to 70% of Iran's missile launchers. The thousands upon thousands of targets inside of Iran across the country have been hit. But I don't think anybody doubted the U.S. military's ability to kind of bloody Iran's nose in perpetuity. That's not the question in my mind. The question for me is, how does this end? What's Trump going to spin as a victory? What is Trump's definition of a victory? On that specific question, he's been sort of ambivalent. Sometimes he says, just degrading the Iranian military's capacity. Other times he kind of hints at regime change, and then the next day he sort of goes back to the military aspect. So I could answer your question a little more thoughtfully if I knew what Trump was actually trying to accomplish inside of Iran. And I think that's a big question right now going forward.
Well, it seems to me he's trying to get everything he can get, but on a defined timeline, which presents challenges. Deadlines present challenges. So yes, the elimination of the nuclear program, the elimination of the ballistic missile launch sites. I mean, they've all but knocked out, according to Admiral Cooper, they've all but knocked out the Navy and the Air Force. I mean, 6,000 combat missions and not a single downed plane, for example.
Right.
And you see the volume of Iran's attempted retaliatory strikes, which has gone from significant to de minimis. So those things, and then regime change is not stated, or it's stated in hushed tones. But and we talked a little bit earlier in the show with Michael Rubin from the Middle East Forum and AEI about this too. Maybe you're getting closer to the sort of conditions that could instigate a popular revolt if you took out a few more of what's left of the sort of power structure there. And so maybe that's still possible. And as VDH said, maybe a popular uprising that installs somebody, or maybe a Venezuelan type temporary solution that is somewhat, at least partially installed by America. But it seems to me that's a wild card, but it's a wild card based on how much can get done, how quickly, because as Trump said, and I don't think he's wrong, I mean, he could take out their ability, their oil infrastructure. He could turn the lights out. The U.S. military could turn the lights out in Iran, or at least Tehran right now, if they wanted to, but he doesn't want to because there's the prospect that maybe we can get somebody in there that we can work with, and we don't want the rebuild job to be bigger than it absolutely needs to be. So it just seems to me like that's still the wild card in addition to the straight a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the possibility of a popular uprising against the Iranian government is certainly on the table, I would say. I don't think it's a very high possibility. And the only reason I say that is because, there's really no organized democratic opposition inside the country. You have a lot of ethnic groups inside Iran who hate the regime but can't really agree on what the best path forward is in the event the regime falls. And of course, the IRGC and the Basij militia, they're weakened, but they're not weakened to the point where the prospects of an opposition movement, a nationwide opposition movement, are high. So, Iranian command and control is still relatively operable. I mean, they've certainly gotten a hit in those over the last 3 weeks. There's no doubt about that. But I think if the goal or the bet is to wait and see of the government falling down or kind of weakening to the point where an uprising becomes possible, I think we're going to be there for a significant period of time. So if I were advising Trump, he's got a lot of things to brag about right now. I would just kind of give a speech to the nation saying, look, we did what we needed to do. Iran's military capacity has been hit very, very hard, and we really have nothing else to do but withdraw and declare victory. I mean, that's essentially what he did against the Houthis last year, and it's an option that he can take with Iran this year.
Well, he sort of did it against Iran last year, too, with the strikes on the nuclear sites. Trump also on NATO, though, he's still saber-rattling in the direction of the NATO countries that are recalcitrant in providing support that he wants, saying this yesterday.
Are you rethinking the United States' relationship with NATO, possibly getting out?
I'm disappointed in NATO that we spend trillions of dollars on NATO. Think of it, trillions over the years, many trillions of dollars. It's one of the reasons we have deficits and we help other countries. And when they don't help us, I mean, it's certainly something that we should think about. I don't need Congress for that decision. As you probably know, I can make that decision myself. I'd work with some very smart people. And I'd always deal with Congress anyway, but I don't need Congress for that decision. But, when you say rethink, I have nothing currently in mind, but I will say that I'm not exactly thrilled when we help them with Ukraine. Look, Ukraine would have been over in one day if we didn't help. Frankly, Ukraine would have been over in the first day. They had the best equipment in the world. It was our equipment given by Sleepy Joe Biden. No charge. Hundreds of billions of dollars of the best equipment in the world. No charge. I will say that I'm not happy about it.
Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron are not making Mark Rudy's job particularly easy these days.
I mean, Mark Rudy has a pretty tough job to begin with, right? So Starmer and Macron are certainly not helping him out, for sure.
Right.
Look, I mean, Trump, this is a going back. Trump does not like a lot of NATO allies, and I understand why. You can recite a laundry list of reasons why the Europeans have sort of been sitting on their heels and watching the events go by and kind of, trying to become relevant. Quite frankly, I think in a lot of these issues, Europeans are relevant players just because their diplomatic and military capacity has atrophied significantly over the last 20 years. On this specific case, I sort of see it both ways. I understand why Trump is frankly angry and annoyed that NATO allies are not helping the United States reopen the Strait of Hormuz, which is, of course, one of the region's most valuable, if not the most valuable waterway. But I can also see why the Europeans wouldn't want to help Trump out because they didn't want this war in the first place, and they don't want to bail him out of what they view as a mistake. So I'm a little ambivalent personally on that score. Trump certainly has a merit to his argument, but I think the Europeans are kind of coming at this and saying, look, we did not want this conflict. Nobody in the region besides Israel wanted this conflict. I don't have enough military capacity anyway to help you out, and even if I did, it would be symbolic. So I see it both ways, Dan.
Yeah, although, I mean, the point of these Western European leaders, like so many congressional Democrats, is you take the same position that I take vis-a-vis Iran and every president since Carter has taken, but you don't want to do anything about it. I mean, so, you're a paper tiger, and this is why we continue to have problems with the lead state sponsor of terror in the country, in the world.
Yeah, I mean, hypocrisy drives domestic politics, doesn't it? It also drives international politics. So that's sort of par for the course, unfortunately.
I wanted to talk about Cuba a little bit because it came up again yesterday when the gentlemen were sitting around entertaining questions from the press. But I want to start going back to this clip that's been circulating of Trump at an event back in 1999. An event in furtherance of some foundation for Cuban Americans and opposition to Castro and all of that business. This was Trump back in 1999 on Cuba and its prospects to get out from under the yoke of Castro's.
Thank you very much. I've had a lot of offers, and sadly it's all been very recently, to go into Cuba on deals, business deals, real estate and other deals. And I've rejected them on the basis that I will go when Cuba's free. As you know, and the people in this room know better than anyone, putting money and investing money in Cuba right now doesn't go to the people of Cuba. It goes into the pockets of Fidel Castro. He's a murderer, he's a killer, he's a bad guy in every respect. Castro's jails are full of dissidents, as you know very well. His graveyards are full of patriots, and his government is full of thugs. And it's inconceivable to me when I see the weak stance taken by our current administration, especially with the spirit in this room, because the spirit of the Cuban people is beyond any spirit that I've seen by any people, and I've been watching it for a long time. And we can't allow him to get away with this program of coming to this country, hiring our best consultants, hiring our best lobbyists, and all of a sudden, senators and various other people miraculously are on the side of Fidel Castro. And now the battle is almost getting tougher, and it should be a battle that would be won or almost won by now. The point is that things can turn around, and they can turn around very rapidly. I believe that you will have victory. I believe you'll have victory sooner rather than later. And you will win. You are going to win. And I'm going to be down here and I'm going to watch you win. I don't know what capacity I'll be. I'll either be the greatest developer in the country or the greatest president that you've had in a long time. I'm not sure.
How about that? The greatest president. Well, we got the president, and whether or not you consider him the greatest, he is the president. So, I mean, there was certainly an eye towards that back in 1999. It's rather remarkable to hear that. And this is seems to be the possibility of that victory that Trump telegraphed back in 1999. Here was Marco Rubio yesterday.
The embargo is codified. And but the bottom line is their economy doesn't work. It's a non-functional economy. It's an economy that has survived. That revolution. It's not even a revolution. That thing they have has survived on subsidies from the Soviet Union and now from Venezuela. They don't get subsidies anymore, so they're in a lot of trouble. And the people in charge they don't know how to fix it. So they have to get new people in charge. That's what has to happen.
And the relationship we have with Venezuela has been, I think you could almost say, incredible.
Well, it's not Castro anymore. It's Diaz-Canel, but it's the same program. And there's been a lot of talk in the last week about taking Cuba, quote unquote. How do you react to all of that, Daniel? And what do you think the prospects? What do you think? Speaking of what that looks like, what does that look like? A regime change in Cuba, or as Trump said earlier in the week, taking Cuba?
Yeah, when you played that clip back from 1999, it's sort of interesting. Trump sort of sounded like a neoconservative, a John Bolton-esque kind of public figure. I would argue right now he's actually being a little more pragmatic with Cuba. And the reason I say that is because he's entering into pretty substantial negotiations with the Cuban government, trying to change the system from within rather than changing it from without using military means. The administration is using economic coercion, mainly by cutting off fuel flows to the islands,
right,
to Cuban government sponsors to pressure them into reforms.
And some of those the reforms like private ownership of the means of production from Cuban expats, for example.
Right, and political forums. It's always been pulling teeth with the Cubans when we try to demand that they soften up their political system, make it more democratic. I think Trump ultimately understands that. He knows the history of Cuba over the last 3 decades, where American presidents have demanded political liberalization on the island, and it hasn't worked. I think Trump is sort of using pressure to kind of open them up economically. And, he's a businessman. Obviously, he wants American enterprise to expand around the world, and Cuba has an opportunity. It's an untapped market, right? 90 miles off the coast of Florida. And for the most part, the Russians and the Chinese and the Venezuelans have been able to do business on the island, and Americans haven't because of the embargo. So we'll see where these talks go. I am mildly optimistic that we could see some sort of economic agreement between the two countries. In terms of political liberalization, I'm very, very I don't expect that to happen in the near future.
It is interesting, though, these pieces, if you put them together. I mean, it's worth taking note. I don't know if I mentioned this the other day, but I read it the other day. I didn't know this, that Iran's largest foreign embassy that Iran has is in Caracas. So the connection, and of course we know about sort of the security intel in Venezuela that was all Cuban. So Venezuela, Cuba, Iran, all with an eye to China. These, and to a lesser extent, Russia. So these pieces in both hemispheres that are part of the CHICOM orbit that are being methodically taken apart by this administration.
Yeah, and if you look at the administration's national security strategy, that they outlined in pretty specific terms that one of the top goals for the United States and the Western Hemisphere is to get adversarial non-hemispheric powers, meaning China and Russia and Iran, out of the hemisphere. And the administration seems to be executing that strategy pretty quickly over the last 2 months. We're seeing some dividends, especially in Venezuela, where things have moved at a very rapid pace. With Cuba, I expect a slower process, but we'll see where it goes. The talks are ongoing, and there is an agreement, or there's an opening for a pretty comprehensive agreement between these two countries. So we'll have to wait and see.
Daniel DePetris is a fellow at Defense Priorities and a syndicated foreign affairs columnist for the Chicago Tribune and Newsweek. Daniel, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Pleasure, Dan. Thank you.
And he joined us on Chicago's Morning Answer.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Why would you take your precious metal collections to some fly-by-night roadshow that rolls into town once a year? The only thing you need to do is follow the road to Fox Valley Coins.